Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I've owned this beautiful 3-acre plot of land adjacent to my house for nearly 15 years now. It was the main reason I bought my current home. While my actual house sits on about half an acre, this additional land has become my sanctuary over the years. My grandfather taught me everything about gardening on this very plot when I was young. When he passed away, he left me enough money to eventually buy this place, knowing how much I loved spending time here as a kid. The previous owners had let the land grow wild, but I saw potential. There's a small stream that cuts through the back portion, several mature oak trees that provide the perfect amount of shade, and a natural clearing where I've been planning to build a workshop for years. I'm not one for confrontation. Friends describe me as level-headed, sometimes to a fault. I believe most problems can be solved with clear communication and respect. Unfortunately, not everyone operates with the same philosophy, as I was about to discover. It all started about 6 months ago when new neighbors moved in on the other side of my undeveloped land. At first, everything seemed fine. We exchanged polite waves when we happened to see each other. The wife would occasionally power walk past my house in the mornings in her designer workout gear, always appearing hurried and important. Her husband seemed perpetually attached to his phone, barely acknowledging anything around him. I didn't mind the minimal interaction. I value my privacy and assumed they did too. That changed one Saturday morning in early spring. I was in my yard, coffee in hand, strolling along the edge of my property where it connects to the undeveloped land. I'd been marking spots where I wanted to plant new raspberry bushes. The morning was quiet, except for birdsong and the occasional distant car. Then I heard her voice. My neighbor was on her back deck, phone pressed to her ear, speaking loudly enough that her words carried clearly through the still morning air. Yes, it's finally happening. The land next door. We're getting it all. 3 whole acres. I've already contacted the pool designer. We're thinking a massive natural stone setup with a waterfall feature and a cabana, maybe even a tennis court on the other side. I froze, coffee halfway to my lips. What was she talking about? The old owner has no idea what to do with it. It's just sitting there collecting weeds. Such a waste. But not for long, she continued with a laugh that set my teeth on edge. The deal is practically done. Just waiting for some final paperwork, but my husband says it's a formality. He knows people. I stood there, bewildered, as she continued detailing her plans for my land. Plans that involved completely reshaping it, cutting down the oak trees my grandfather and I used to picnic under, and redirecting the stream that supports the local wildlife. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. Perhaps they were buying different land nearby. I decided the neighborly thing to do was to clear things up directly. I walked over to her property, my mind rehearsing a polite but firm clarification. She was still on her deck, now scrolling through her phone when she noticed me approaching. Her expression shifted from surprise to a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning," I called up to her. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation about buying the land next door." "Oh!" Her smile widened. "Yes, isn't it exciting? It's going to transform the whole neighborhood." "There seems to be some confusion," I said carefully. "That land is actually mine. I've owned it for 15 years. It's not for sale." She blinked at me, then let out a small laugh as if I'd told a joke. No, you must be confused. My husband has been in talks with the owner's representative. It's all being handled very professionally." "I am the owner," I repeated, more firmly this time. "There is no representative because I haven't listed it for sale. There must be some misunderstanding." Her expression hardened slightly, though the smile remained fixed. "Listen, I understand this might be surprising news, but these things happen. My husband works in real estate development. He knows how these deals work. You'll be compensated fairly, of course." I felt my patience wearing thin. "There is no deal. I am the legal, registered owner of that land, and I have no intention of selling it." She sighed, looking at me with something between pity and annoyance. "Look, I don't handle the paperwork side of things. My husband does. But I can assure you it's happening. We've already secured financing and started the design process." Without confirming ownership, I asked, incredulous. "Like I said, my husband handles those details. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have calls to make." With that, she turned and went inside, effectively dismissing me from her property and, apparently, from reality itself. I walked back to my house, equal parts confused and angry. Who did these people think they were? And what exactly did they think they were doing? The next day, I called the county clerk's office just to triple-check that there hadn't been some bizarre paperwork error. Of course, my ownership was confirmed. Property taxes all paid up, everything in perfect order. I pulled out my deed and other documents, making copies and storing them in multiple places, including electronically. Something told me I might need them. For about a week, things stayed quiet. I considered reaching out to them again, maybe trying to talk to the husband directly, but decided against it. Their delusion wasn't my responsibility to fix. Then came the stakes. I returned from work one evening to find thin wooden stakes with bright pink ribbons driven into my land, forming a large rectangular shape that took up nearly half of the property. I walked over and examined them, my blood pressure rising with each step. These weren't just marking a boundary. They were laying out what looked like a substantial construction project. As if on cue, my neighbor appeared, clipboard in hand, speaking to a man in a polo shirt with a surveying company's logo. They were standing on my property about 50 feet in from the edge. "Excuse me," I called out, striding toward them. "What's going on here?" The man in the polo turned, looking professionally neutral. "Just marking out for a preliminary survey." "On whose authority?" I demanded. My neighbor cut in. "We've contracted with them. It's fine." "It's not fine," I said firmly. "This is my property. You have no right to be here, much less stake anything out." The surveyor looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he addressed my neighbor, "you did say you owned this land or had permission from the owner?" "We're in the process of acquiring it," she said dismissively. "It's practically ours." I pulled out my phone. "I have copies of my deed right here. I can show you. I am the legal owner of this land, and I have not agreed to sell it to anyone." The surveyor looked between us, clearly sensing he'd stepped into a complicated situation. "I think we should pause here until the ownership is clarified. I can't proceed if there's a dispute." My neighbor's face flushed. "There is no dispute. My husband has been handling everything through the proper channels." "Then you should speak with your husband," I suggested, trying to keep my voice level. "Because there has been no contact with me, the actual owner, through any channel, proper or otherwise." The surveyor quietly packed up his equipment while my neighbor fumed. As he headed back to his truck, she turned on me. "What do you think you're doing? Do you know how much it costs to reschedule these people?" "Probably less than it costs to trespass and attempt to develop someone else's land," I replied. "Please remove these stakes from my property immediately." "This is ridiculous! My husband will be hearing about this!" She stomped away, leaving the stakes behind. I spent the evening pulling them out myself, wondering what kind of alternate reality these people were living in. The next morning, I called a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. After explaining the situation, he agreed it was unusual enough to warrant a consultation. The lawyer confirmed what I already knew. I was the legal owner, and no one could develop my land without my permission. He suggested sending a formal cease and desist letter, which we drafted together. It clearly stated my ownership, demanded all activities on my land stop immediately, and warned of legal consequences if the harassment continued. I had the letter delivered to their house the next day via certified mail, so there would be a record of receipt. For a few days, there was blessed silence. I hoped they had finally accepted reality. I was wrong. The following Saturday, I woke to the sound of an engine. Looking out my bedroom window, I was horrified to see a small excavator driving onto my land from the road access point. Behind it was a pickup truck with my neighbor in the passenger seat, gesturing animatedly. I threw on clothes and ran outside. By the time I reached them, the excavator was positioned near where the stakes had been, and a man was unfolding what looked like construction plans on the hood of the truck. "Stop!" I shouted as I approached. "This is private property. You need to leave immediately." The excavator operator killed the engine, looking confused. My neighbor rolled her eyes dramatically. "Not this again," she said to the men. "Just ignore the neighbor. We have all the necessary permissions." "No, you absolutely do not," I stated firmly. "I sent you a legal cease and desist letter. I am the owner of this property. I have not given permission for any work to be done here." "Lady, is this true?" The excavator operator asked my neighbor directly. "We need permits and permissions for this kind of job. I can't dig without them." "My husband has handled all of that," she insisted, but I could see uncertainty flickering across her face for the first time. "The paperwork is being processed." "There is no paperwork," I said, pulling out my phone. "I have the deed right here. I can call the sheriff right now to report trespassing if you don't leave." The operator shook his head. "I'm not getting involved in a property dispute. Call us when you have clear documentation." He climbed back into his excavator. My neighbor was livid. "You can't leave. We have a contract. And I have a license I can't risk losing," he replied, starting the engine. "Sort out the ownership first." As the excavator drove away, my neighbor turned her fury on me. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We've paid deposits. We have schedules to keep." "None of that is my concern," I replied calmly. "This is my land. It's not for sale. Any money you've spent trying to develop property you don't own is your problem, not mine. My husband will sue you for this. He has connections. You'll regret standing in our way." I'd had enough. I've documented everything. Every trespass, every false claim, every attempt to develop my land without permission. If anyone has grounds for a lawsuit, it's me. Now please leave my property and don't come back without written permission. She stormed off, phone already at her ear, presumably calling her husband. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. The land will be ours one way or another." I forwarded it to my lawyer, who advised me to install security cameras covering the property. The next day I did exactly that, positioning them to cover the main access points and the areas where they had planned to begin excavation. 2 days later, my cameras captured my neighbor's husband walking my property, phone in hand, taking pictures and making notes. I sent the footage to my lawyer, who sent a second, more strongly worded cease and desist letter to both of them. The response came in the form of a letter from their own lawyer, claiming they had an agreement in principle with a real estate agent representing the owner of the land. The letter demanded I cease interfering with their rightful development plans. My lawyer responded with copies of my deed, property tax records, and a clear statement that no agent had ever been authorized to represent me or sell my land. He also included a formal notice that any further entrance onto my property would be considered criminal trespassing and would be reported to the police. For a week, there was an uneasy silence. Then I received a notice from the county that someone had applied for a building permit for my land. The application listed my neighbors as the property owners. This was crossing from annoying into potentially damaging territory. If they somehow managed to convince officials they had a right to build on my land, I could be facing a bureaucratic nightmare. I immediately filed a formal objection with the county, providing all my ownership documentation. The permit application was put on hold pending resolution of the ownership question. My neighbors were now actively trying to steal my land through paperwork. This called for more decisive action. I consulted with my lawyer again, and we agreed on a multi-pronged approach. First, we filed a formal complaint with the police regarding criminal trespass and attempted fraud. Second, we prepared a civil lawsuit for harassment, fraud, trespass, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Third, and most satisfyingly, I decided to make my ownership undeniably visible to everyone. I contacted a fencing company and scheduled installation of a 6-foot privacy fence along the entire boundary between my land and my neighbor's property. I also arranged for private property and no trespassing signs to be placed at regular intervals around the perimeter of my land. But I wasn't done yet. The day before the fence installation, I hired a landscaping crew to begin work on a project I'd been planning for years, but had never gotten around to starting. A series of raised garden beds, fruit trees, and a small greenhouse near the center of the property, right where my neighbors had planned to put their pool. The morning the fence crew arrived, my neighbors were visibly shocked. They came rushing out as the first posts were being set. "What do you think you're doing?" the husband demanded, finally making a personal appearance in this drama. "Improving my property," I replied simply, "just like you've been so eager to do. You can't put a fence here. We have plans for this land." "Your plans for my land are irrelevant," I stated. "This fence is being installed entirely on my property, as you can see from the survey markers my licensed surveyor placed yesterday." I pointed to the official markers, professionally placed and documented. "We'll fight this," he threatened, his face reddening. "You're welcome to try," I replied calmly. "But you might want to consult with your lawyer about the criminal complaint and civil lawsuit I've filed first. The police should be contacting you shortly about the fraudulent building permit application." That got his attention. His expression shifted from anger to concern. "What lawsuit?" "For harassment, trespass, fraud, and emotional distress," I explained. "All well documented with dates, times, photographs, and video evidence. Your wife's text messages have been particularly helpful." He paled slightly. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Indeed there has," I agreed. "You and your wife seem to have misunderstood that you can't simply take land that belongs to someone else. That misunderstanding has now exposed you to both criminal and civil liability." He muttered something about talking to his lawyer and retreated back to his house. The fence went up over the next 2 days, a beautiful, solid cedar privacy fence that actually enhanced my property. The landscaping crew continued their work, transforming the center of my land into the beginning of what would become a stunning garden sanctuary. A week later, I received a letter from my neighbor's lawyer. They were withdrawing any claim to my land and requested that I consider dropping my lawsuit in return. After consulting with my lawyer, I agreed to drop the lawsuit if they paid for all my legal fees to date, the cost of the fence, and signed a legally binding document acknowledging my ownership and agreeing never to trespass on my property again. They agreed to all terms. As it turned out, my neighbor's husband had been told by a questionable real estate consultant that he could acquire abandoned or underutilized property through an aggressive approach combining adverse possession claims and pressuring the owner. The consultant had falsely informed him that my land was in a legal gray area because it was undeveloped. Of course, none of that was true. Adverse possession requires years of open, notorious, and continuous possession, not just putting up some stakes and filing fraudulent paperwork. And my regular maintenance and use of the land, plus paid property taxes, made it clearly and actively owned. The settlement covered not just my legal fees, but also the entire cost of my new fence and a portion of my landscaping expenses. Essentially, my neighbors ended up paying for improvements to my property, exactly the opposite of what they had intended. These days, I enjoy my land more than ever. My garden project is flourishing, with raised beds full of vegetables, berry bushes along the stream, and a charming greenhouse where I start seedlings each spring. The privacy fence provides a perfect backdrop for climbing roses and creates a serene boundary between my property and the neighbors. As for them, they avoid eye contact when we happen to see each other around the neighborhood. They've also put their house up for sale, apparently unable to bear living next to the constant reminder of their failed land grab and subsequent humiliation. I've learned that sometimes standing your ground, literally in this case, is absolutely necessary. While I still prefer peaceful resolution to conflicts, I won't hesitate to protect what's mine through every legal means available. The land that my grandfather inspired me to cherish is more beautiful than ever, and entirely, undisputedly mine. And every time I walk through my garden or sit beneath the oak trees listening to the stream, I smile at how their entitled scheme to take what wasn't theirs only ended up making my property better, at their expense. I taught them a lesson about property rights and came out on top, both legally and literally, on my own high ground. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I was discussing this sub with a good friend, and he said, "Boy, have I got a story that'll fit." It wasn't his story but his brother's, and I sat with him and got the details. Buckle up, it's a good one. And a long one. Let's call him Bob. Bob has been fiddling with computers since he was a kid, and knows them pretty well. As with most IT people, he's moved from job to job. The employer he worked for was a service distribution company, and there were 2 IT employees. The company was located in Ontario, Canada. About 3 years ago, Bob's employer decided to modernize their software. They had separate programs for dispatching, for inventory, for payroll and finances, and it was complicated moving information from one program to the other. They decided to get an ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning program, and Bob recommended one that he knew inside out from a previous employer. For those of you who don't know, an ERP program handles everything. Purchase orders, sales, inventory, personnel, vendors, customers, all of it. You can run a report and find out which customer has bought the most part ABC in the last year, which salesman has improved his numbers the most, which vendor has the fastest delivery time, which shipper packed the most orders. Everyone in the company used the ERP program, but it was very complicated, and they used the aspects of it that related to their position. For example, the receiver would accept a shipment, verify the quantity, confirm it was received, and the inventory stats would be available to the salespeople if they wanted to look up how many were on hand. The receiver didn't care what the price was or who the vendor was, he just did his job. Bob was run ragged during the implementation process, but he managed to train most of the employees on their aspects, and after a few months, everything was running fairly smoothly. Bob still got tickets for tweaks in the operation of the software and occasional hardware IT issues. Then the company decided to expand their footprint and was marketing into different time zones. That messed things up. Atlantic Canada is 90 minutes early, so if someone sent an email or an order at 8 a.m. their time, it would arrive at 6:30 a.m. Ontario time. Pacific Canada is 3 hours late, so an email sent at 3 p.m. Vancouver time would arrive at 6 p.m. This stretched out the day, so many staff came in early and worked late. Bob would arrive at 8 a.m., and there would be people that demanded his immediate assistance and were annoyed that he didn't respond instantly, even though their request was submitted before his start time. Same with late in the day. His phone would ring at dinner time with people that wanted help right now. They decided to stagger his and his IT colleagues' shift times. Bob would start at 6 a.m. and work till 2:30, and his colleague would start at 10:30 a.m. and work till 7 p.m. Bob's colleague had kids and refused the shift change. The employer insisted. The colleague quit. That meant that Bob was the only person in the IT department. The employer said they would look to hire a new IT guy, but they had trouble finding one that knew the ERP system. and they were offering well under a market value salary. Bob asked for a raise and was denied. Then he wanted overtime, and the employer told him that as an IT specialist, he was exempt from overtime laws in Ontario. Bob looked it up, and the employer was correct. This went on for some time, and he knew lots of IT people socially. They told him what the company was offering, and Bob knew that they wouldn't find another tech. Things went downhill from there. Bob would get chewed out if he missed a call or an email, no matter what time it came in. He had to train new hires in the ERP system as well as take care of the hardware. He asked repeatedly for better compensation and was denied, so he planned to get a new job. Now here's the revenge. Bob had access to the entirety of the ERP program. When a user signed in, the time was logged, and even if they didn't sign out after 15 minutes, it would log them out anyway. Everyone in the company was on salary, and many of them came in early and stayed late. Ontario labor law states that even salaried workers are entitled to overtime after 44 hours a week unless they were managers or supervisors. So Bob jumped into the program and ran a report for each employee that wasn't a manager, all the way back to when the ERP program was started. Then he reached out to an employment lawyer and got the okay to refer employees to him. Bob lined up another job, and after he left, every employee in the company got an email with an Excel sheet showing the hours they had put in past 44 hours a week. The subject line said, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay." In the body of the email was the lawyer's name. The crap hit the fan. Almost every employee authorized the lawyer to negotiate with the company on their behalf, and the company had to pay a ton of money. All the company had to do was pay Bob for the extra work he put in. Instead, they had to pay almost everyone. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I work at a massive company in corporate. Great place, but unfortunately was stuck under a micromanaging director who had random neurotic episodes. Our team was always burnt out because if Mr. Director saw you leave your desk for any reason, like to go to the bathroom, get water, or take a lunch break, he took that as you not being busy enough and would pile on even more useless work. And if you left a minute before 5:05, he got really upset. Oh, and forget about working from home. Everyone else did. Finally, the time came for the big international trip I had been planning for years that was now possible after COVID. I hardly took time off and slaved away the whole year while my friends on other teams enjoyed life. We were more pressured this year to always be working and not take time off. We had so much work we couldn't even take time off. I ensure everything is wrapped up first, plus it's December, so most people are out anyway. Take my 1.5-week trip and had an amazing time. Fast forward a month, and my manager, who reports to Mr. Director, tells me that I need to watch out and not take so much vacation. He states matter-of-factly that I need to be more careful about using my days, and I've actually run out of time to take off. What? We're checking vacation days? I was shocked as we were repeatedly told that we should not log our days in the system because they aren't checking. It's an honor system. And nobody cares how many days you take if it's reasonable. I ask, what should I do differently? I always check well in advance and add it on your calendar. Should I start logging my days in the system? How is that possible if I have at least a week left? I keep track myself. He won't give me a straight answer and is super vague. Okay, since we're now tracking vacation days, I'll make sure I log everything in the system. I went in and backlogged all of the days I had ever taken off prior years. Weeks upon weeks of PTO. Even needed HR approval since some were so long ago. Manager had to go in and approve every single request since it notifies you and requires you to respond. Going forward, I submitted everything. And yes, I had plenty of PTO left. Manager starts getting annoyed, says that I really don't need to log time off. I stop him right there. But I thought I was taking too much vacation. We all need to be sure that we're being truthful about the honor system. He doesn't know what to say. Later, a teammate tells me what really went down. Turns out one day, Mr. Director decided that his team was taking too much time off, that all the useless work he assigned was not getting done. He had one of his tantrums and started freaking out and tracked down every day off, doctor's appointment, sick day, etc., that our team of 8 people had taken going back at least a year. He was checking calendars, digging up emails, asking other people if they saw us this day or that. Even though he had told us time and time again, you don't need to log your days, we're not checking. But because Mr. Director was a B-cluster narcissist, he was much too busy and important to take up his concerns with us lowly employees directly, or to talk things through like an adult and get all the facts first. But not too busy to account for every hour I wasn't at work. This would be one of many infractions that came out of nowhere. Mr. Director was also an extremely difficult person to work with. Other teams did not want to work with our team. He treated people poorly, and I can't tell you how many people flat out hated him. And guess what? Nobody had used anywhere near all their PTO. There were zero performance concerns, and we were an extremely high-performing team due to the constant fear of setting him off. I always asked for feedback and got nothing. Yet coworkers with planned family trips were getting pressured into pushing them back again and again and again because Mr. Director needed them there sitting at their desk in case something important came up. Meanwhile, Mr. Director made sure to use more than his allotted PTO days and frequently took week-long trips. I made sure to use the rest of my PTO days since they were now being tracked. Mr. Director actually tried to stop it, but I threatened to take it up with HR since I had plenty of time left and he backed off. Thankfully, I escaped that team and moved internally. I was doing so much work, much of it technical for a non-technical team, that nobody knew how to do it. Mr. Director was frantically reaching out to me and demanding me to fix stuff. Even though I spent my last 2 weeks documenting and transitioning over everything, I chose to ignore him and it felt great. My old teammates still there are miserable. The people that replaced us are already trying to leave. One guy who'd been with the company for years completely left the company a month after joining this team when realizing his mistake. The next one is an entitled people story, so I got into a fight with 2 people tonight. The reason in itself was very dumb, but God, I was just tired of it. I met up today with 2 friends, Clara and Jenny, fake names. We went out to a bar and sat on one of the tables outside. There was a TV on the bar, so there were many people watching a football match with different drinks. We got our drinks, and after a while, a man came, left his drink on our table, and left. We looked at each other like, what the hell? The bar is literally 5 feet apart, and there weren't even that many people. He could have easily put his glass there instead of on our table, but whatever. We kept talking and drinking, and after a while, there was another man who left his finished drink at our table. I can leave this here, right? He asked, didn't even wait for our answer and left. Again, what the hell, we were annoyed, but whatever. Then came a polite guy and he asked us if he could leave his drink on our table for a bit because he was waiting for a friend. It was cold and his hands were freezing. We said, yeah, of course you can, man. No worries. He even offered to put it on the floor if it annoyed us, but we had no problem with it. Gave the drink to his friend, thanked us, then they left. And after a while, another drink was left in our table. The guy didn't even look at us, he just put it there and it was obvious it wasn't finished. So, I had enough. It may seem petty, but you aren't sitting in this table, therefore you don't use it. If he had asked us if he could leave it there for a moment like the previous guy, we would have had no problem, but he didn't. Rude. So, I took the drink, got up, walked towards him and offered it to him. Me. Excuse me, this is yours. Him. What the... Is it bothering you that much? Me. Yeah, it is. It hasn't been the first time, and we aren't the bar. If you're finished with your drink, the bar is 5 feet apart from you. A friend of his took the man's drink and put both his and his friend's drink on our table to piss us off. So I got up, grabbed the drinks, and took them to the bar. I knew they weren't finished, and I knew they'd be annoyed, but that's what happens when I run out of patience. I don't care anymore. They said I was being ridiculous while I walked away, and when I came back, Clara was yelling at one of them and tugging on one of the men's arm. I then saw she had my umbrella on her hand, and I realized that while I was returning the drinks, they had tried to steal my umbrella, and Clara was getting it back for me. Jenny had been in shock, but at that she started arguing as well. They got more and more rude, saying how we had no manners when I had been nothing but polite with them. It was only when they yelled at us that we started to yell back at them. We kept telling them it wasn't their table, and that if it was only for a moment they could have asked us and we wouldn't have minded at all. At one point, to piss us off, one of them got dirty cans that had been on the floor and put them on our table. I threw them away while still arguing with them. One of their friends apologized to us and looked so embarrassed. They went away for a bit, and one of them came back for more, until we pointed out how he was a grown 50-year-old man harassing and arguing with women in their 20s over a table and a drink. The friend that had been supporting knew at that moment that they were embarrassing themselves because he came back and told him, "Come on, man, you're an adult. If you want to watch the football match on the TV, then fine. And if you want to get a drink and there aren't any tables left, then that's a you problem." If they had asked like the third polite guy, we wouldn't have minded, but instead they blew it up because that's how drunk and bored they were. There were even people on our side telling them to leave us alone. I feel a bit silly now that I have a more clear head for how I behaved, but God, I was just so tired of people using our table as if it was theirs at that moment. I never insulted them. BTW, when I say I screamed at them, I mean that I kept remarking how it was our table and to leave us alone. Edit 1. I'm seeing a lot of comments saying the staff should have done something or wondering why we didn't tell the staff. First of all, in my country, there aren't bouncers at bars. They are at discos. The concept of drinking here is very different to the American one. In my country, it's very normal to see parents drinking peacefully at a bar while their children play on a nearby park, or for their children to join them and have a soda or a non-alcoholic drink. It's normal for people to be at a bar with friends at 11 a.m. on a Saturday and having a drink with them. Second, most people who were outside drinking would go to the bar, get the drink, pay for it, then leave and drink it outside. Finally, it was busier inside than outside, and there weren't many workers, and the ones who were working were doing everything at once, with some of them acting as both waiters and as bartenders. It wasn't very crowded, but there were still a lot of people they had to take care of. They probably didn't even see nor hear what was going on outside due to how many people were inside. They were just two drunk, idiotic men, and we were able to handle them. It all happened pretty fast anyway. Edit 2. I've seen some people say that it's a public table. We weren't at the long bar table, where people usually leave their drinks so that the bartenders can get them from the other side to clean them. We were outside at a small square table, and said table had 4 chairs for people to sit down on. Imagine you go to a restaurant to have lunch with your family, you get served your first plate, and a stranger suddenly puts his drink on your table. That's the kind of table we were on, but smaller. Anyway, thank you for